What's up guys, my name is Austin Black, and for the longest time now, I've been shouting from the mountaintops about Sigma lenses for Sony. I recently picked up the 135, and this thing is, it's a huge lens. I feel like I'm holding like a caveman club or something, but now we have the 24, we have the 50, and now the 135. I feel like I can kind of consolidate my thoughts on these lenses and give you guys an in-depth look at my experience with these and kind of figure out if these lenses are a good choice for you. So here we go. So first off, a little preface here. I am primarily a filmmaker. I shoot weddings, I make YouTube videos, but my wife, Kristen, runs the photography side of our business. So while we won't be focusing on these in an in-depth photography type of perspective, this is more geared toward other filmmakers. I do want to cover some of the photo aspects of these lenses because, I mean, that's what they are. They are photography lenses. These are not cinema lenses, but we'll get into it. We'll discuss everything. So I want to take you back to where I was with lenses in about September, October of last year. I primarily shot on the 16-35 f4. I had that lens on a gimbal, and I was shooting on that for a lot of the day. That lens really struggled in low light, and I just really wasn't like completely satisfied with that type of lens. I wasn't getting the dynamic shots that I wanted to. I wasn't getting the low light performance. I felt like it just wasn't versatile for weddings and for the stuff I was doing. And then on the mid-range, I had the SLR Magic primes, I had the 35mm, and I had the 50mm. So those were my primary low light lenses. And you know, the optical quality of those lenses is just kind of so-so. There's some problems with contrast, there's some problems with ghosting, there's some problems with like chromatic aberration. But I was just really interested in that f1.2, that f1.1, that creamy bokeh, that shallow depth of field, that I kind of ignored those things. And then moving on to like the telephoto end, I had the 85mm 1.8 Sony lens. That lens is good, I still use it, but it does kind of suffer from a little bit of low contrast from time to time, especially if the subject is being backlit or something. So I kind of found myself at a place where I wasn't completely satisfied with the lenses that I had. And I started to look at Sigma as an option because I really wanted top-end optical quality. I was looking at lenses like the 55 1.8 Zeiss. I was looking at lenses like the 35 1.4 Zeiss. I ultimately went with the Sigma 24mm f1.4. That was the first one I bought. So this became my primary lens that I put on my gimbal. And when I started shooting with this, when I started shooting weddings, I noticed a drastic increase in quality. I felt like it opened up a lot of versatility for me. I really liked the punchiness. I really liked the contrast of this lens. So I kind of decided at that point, I'm gonna make my own little roadmap and we're going to invest in the Sigma Art Glass. This is gonna be something that we kind of strive for over the next 6 to 8 months, basically. So in November, I purchased the Sigma 50 1.4, and that's kind of when I started developing the new way of shooting. In 2019, I kind of started shooting in that style that you've seen, where I have a camera with the Sigma 24 on the gimbal, and then I have another camera handheld with the 50, kind of capturing two angles for all of the important moments. That's kind of the genesis of that. And that's something that I think has added a whole new level of dynamic shots to my wedding films. I think that I'm able to create these sequences. So again, great experience with the 50. I just got the Sigma 135, and I kind of got that to replace the 85 in a way. Maybe not completely replace one for one, but to kind of take the role of that being the primary telephoto lens in our arsenal. And I went with 135 because I constantly am wishing I had more reach, especially shooting on a full frame camera. Sometimes you're gonna shoot events where you kind of need a 70-200 or something like it. And for me, a 135 is just kind of a more dynamic option in terms of photo, video possibilities, and also just for, you know, general low light stuff. It's gonna look better than a 70-200, and it's not like I really don't think you're giving up that much. So that's my story. I know it was very long-winded. I want to now talk a little bit more about these lenses, about the quality, and about what you could expect from these lenses. First of all, build quality. These lenses are built really well, I think. They're all very heavy. They all are very large lenses, but I'll get into that a little bit more later. One of the things I really like about the build quality is that they kept the focusing mechanism on the Canon and Nikon versions of the lenses. So that means these are not fly-by-wire focusing lenses. It has a much more tactile feel. There are hard stops at infinity and minimum focusing distance, which mean you can use it with really smart tech like this Tilta Nucleus N. I really think this device is cool, and I wouldn't be able to calibrate a Sony G Master lens quickly on this device because it's got the fly-by-wire focus. It doesn't have the hard stops. So I really like that about these lenses. It's definitely a pro for me. But getting back into the size, these things are huge. Here is the big one, the 135, and you can kind of see a couple things with this lens. So first of all, it's actually not that big if you take off the lens hood, but basically what this segment of the lens is basically like a hard baked in MC11 adapter on the Canon version of these Sigma lenses. That might sound like a pretty major negative. Why don't you just buy the Canon version with the adapter? Well, I think there are a lot of benefits to having native lenses, but the size of these lenses is a little bit of a bummer, I will say. I don't really have much trouble balancing the 24 on the gimbal. That's the main way that the size might have got in my way. I have no problem traveling with lenses like this. I took the 24mm on our honeymoon to France, and I mean, no problem. It's pretty much the same as any other lens. It's maybe a little bit heavier, but you know, it's not going to be a big difference. Now, the 85 is, I think, apparently bigger than this one, so maybe that might be a problem for the E-mount. Maybe you need to kind of be thinking along the lines of getting some support for these lenses, and maybe that's a little bit of a turnoff. I mean, I don't know. I haven't experienced any issues with that regarding the 135, but I will say that size and weight is a little bit of a drawback. So another point of concern potentially is the autofocus. You kind of get the idea based on what people have said online that it's like using an adapted version of the Sigma art lenses. I don't have any experience with that specific combination, but I have used adapted lenses on Sony, and I definitely think that these lenses perform better than any adapted lens I've used on Sony. That's not to say that they're going to be on par with Zeiss or G Master glass, but I don't think you're going to have any big complaints about the autofocus. You're still getting eye autofocus, face detection, you know, the whole playbook you still have access to. So I mean, you know, I've been fine with the autofocus for the most part. Now, I will say with the 135, the autofocus is a little bit finicky, but I kind of think that's more the nature of a lens that telephoto, because it kind of has to go through its full range to grab focus sometimes. So it actually has a dial on it where you can switch between close focus and far focus, basically. That's okay with me. I mean, even the 85, the lens I used previously, a Sony native lens, sometimes struggled with autofocus, so I don't mind manual focusing in that situation, but overall, you know, I've been happy with it. Okay, so let's go out and let's kind of see how these perform in terms of their photo capabilities. So Kristen and I are in a random shopping center. They have these magnolia trees here, which is a good location to test out some of the Sigma glass for photography. So you guys know I'm mostly a video guy. I don't shoot a ton of photos, but we're gonna just kind of show off all of these different focal lengths, and I'm pretty excited to shoot here. I think it'll be pretty cool. So the Sigma 24 is a little bit out of its element here. It's definitely not a portrait lens in the traditional sense, but you can still do some cool environmental portraits with it, and you can still get some separation that looks pretty pleasing. The 50, on the other hand, is definitely more of a portrait lens. You're getting much more background blur, and it's just a great general purpose lens. This is like the basic focal length. I'd be comfortable using this for just about anything unless I needed the reach. Now the Sigma 135, this thing is just a monster in terms of background blur and separating a subject from the background. This thing is not great for every portrait, but in general, this is a beast portrait lens, and it's great for things where you need that extra bit of reach for sure. So Kristen is the main photographer at our business. So what do you think about the Sigma art primes for photography?
Well, my favorite ones are the 50 and the 135.
The 135, yeah, yes. That one's new.
And they're so huge to use, but they're worth it. I think they set us apart and they make me feel more like a professional. They're not G-Master lenses, but I think that they look really clean, really pretty bokeh, nice skin tones, and great lens flares. And I shoot at golden hour anyways, so
yeah, we're seeing some lens flares right there.
Make it flare.
Yeah. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, we have the Sony 85, and I always feel like that lens kind of struggles in terms of like its contrast. Sometimes it looks really soft, especially when you're backlighting. And I think this is a pretty good example. You know, you've got the lens flare behind and the contrast is just always there. It always looks great. We both love to backlight the subject, and I think it's great for that. So I want to talk a little bit about what went into the specific lenses that I picked from this Sigma lineup. I went with the 24, the 50, and the 135. I know the standard setup might be a 35, 50, and 85. I like the more spread out because, one, I own a couple lenses that fill in those gaps, like the Tamron 28-75 and the Sony 85-1.8. I think that allows me to take a few more risks going kind of, a little bit wider and a little bit tighter at the far end. But, I really think a 24 is more versatile than a 35. There's not that much difference between a 35 and a 50 for what I do. I would have also been interested in the new Sigma 40mm 1.4, but I just went with the 50 just because it's more of the standard focal length. And then the 135, like I said, it's just so I can have that extra reach on the telephoto end of my lens lineup. So bottom line, are these Sigma lenses worth it for Sony? And I think that's a complicated question. In terms of quality, yeah, absolutely. I feel like these Sigma lenses have taken my filmmaking to the next level in a way, or at least been a part of that. I think that there's really nothing that beats the quality aside from the G-Master glass. So, you're saving money, you're getting the quality. The only reticence that I might have to go out and buy these lenses today is the fact that Sigma might be making more of these lenses native to the E-mount without the little built-in adapter thing. So it's kind of up to you to decide, is the Sigma lens the best long-term investment for me if Sigma is going to come in and redesign these lenses? I don't know. They might redesign them and they might have the fly-by-wire focusing system. We don't have any of that information, but what I can tell you is that these lenses have been completely amazing to work with, and it really has taken my production value to the next level. So let me know what you think. Let me know if you own one of these Sigma lenses. Let me know what your favorite focal length is. Also, remember, in the description box, there's a link to my kit page. If you purchase anything, those links are affiliated and I get a small kickback. So that would be great if you did. No pressure if you didn't. And I will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.